Well, I'd like to say first of all welcome to elected members to start with, because this is our first full council meeting in this wonderful, wonderful chamber, and it's great to be here. But a special welcome to our guests. You are very welcome, and it's great that you've come here this evening for this very special council meeting. I won't say much more except to introduce it by saying that Norwich has some very good friends, and one of our bezies is about to get an honour which I will pass over to Councillor Walters to move the item forward.
Well, thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and it's very good that we're able to do this in person in 3D rather than the flat screens of a Teams meeting. I'm really pleased that Jane's been able to attend this special meeting of the Council in person with her husband Richard and accompanied by distinguished guests. So before I speak about Jane, I feel I should say something about the history of the freedom of the city. We were discussing this in the Lord Mayor's parlour a little earlier. And I'm grateful to Liam Mickleborough, our monitoring officer, for the following information. So in the Middle Ages, to be given the freedom of the city was literally the right to be free. Free of feudal obligations, and crucially, in economic terms, the ability to trade freely. It was the free men, note the gender, of Norwich who controlled the system of local government and who elected the mayor. We have a more democratic approach now. And the status of freemen brought with it various rights, including the right to graze animals or to be hung by a silk rope if you were found guilty of a particularly heinous crime. What delights await. The honorary freedom, which we are granting this evening, didn't come in until the 16th century. Before that, it could be inherited. Incidentally, the City Council did get a change in the law about 20 years ago to recognise free women, or could be purchased for at least 20 shillings. I can confirm this evening and honestly say that no money has changed hands. So to Jane's contribution, it's been considerable. From the first time I met Jane for a one-to-one, she brought me Christmas lunch, which endeared me to her immediately. Her keenness and her kindness has made her an excellent partner in the work of shaping and helping to develop the Norwich 2040 Vision Partnership and the successes that have flowed from that work across the city. And we've been hosted in the Dean's lodgings on more than one occasion to debate the issues that face the city and the opportunities that we could mobilise together to make the city a better place. And the Dean's breakfasts each month, I get the impression that the numbers have just generally expanded during your tenure, have been a brilliant way of fostering collaborative working and enhancing the understanding of how the city ticks. And Jane has used the interior spaces of the cathedral in a most innovative way. And my colleague, Councillor Gail Harris, will have more to say on that theme. And the cathedral, as we know, has many vital roles. But it has, under her stewardship, also become more a part of the city as a place of exploration and experience. A great partner to contributing to the cultural richness of the city. And I suppose in the past I would never have thought of saying, as I did to some friends who've got young children, and they're saying, well, what do we do with the children at half term? And I said, go to the cathedral. It's a fun place. There's lots going on. So that dimension which the qualities that Jane has brought to the cathedral, our sense of it as a place, an opportunity for a range of different experiences, has been immense. So Jane richly deserves the highest honour the City Council can bestow. And I wish you and Richard all the very best for the next chapter in your lives. And if you wish to exercise one of the residual medieval rights of walking your sheep to Norwich and Alnwick to graze, free incidentally of any charges, you will be most welcome. So I would like to move that we grant the honorary freedom of the City of Norwich to the very Reverend Dr. Jane Hedges.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. I would now call upon Councillor Harris to second this item.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm extremely happy to be able to second the proposal by Councillor Alan Walters to award the freedom of the city to the Very Reverend Dr. Jane Hedges. I thought that I'd best start with a quick internet search when preparing this speech, and it was then I found that Jane had achieved a number of firsts in her career. The first woman to be appointed a residentiary canon in the Church of England, the first woman canon at Westminster Abbey, and the first woman to be appointed dean in the cathedral's 900-year history. Quite a trailblazer. However, I want to talk about the contribution that I feel Jane has made to Norwich since her appointment in 2014, and the reasons that I had no hesitation in supporting Jane for this award. I've seen Jane at many cathedral services. I've sat in meetings with her discussing homelessness and rough sleeping. I've seen her in chapter meetings, but most of all I respect Jane for making the cathedral accessible to all. Charities such as St Martin's Housing Trust and Time Norfolk started off with small annual services in the cathedral, and they have grown year on year. I know from personal experience just how much these services mean to the charities, and indeed how much they mean to the participants. A safe and calm place to reflect and be supported. It's hard for me to forget the experience of participating in a game of cage football in the nave of the cathedral at an all-night event for young people. At the time, I was one of the consorts for Lord Mayor Marion Maxwell, and we had been invited to see the many activities organised for that night. I most certainly hadn't expected to be participating in a game of cage football, so the heels that I was wearing were not ideal. However, it was myself and the Dean against the Lord Mayor and the Bishop of the time. The Dean and I won, but I'm not so sure that our victory was taken well by our opposition. There have been such successful events within the cathedral as the Helter Skelter and the fantastic Dippy the Dinosaur Tour. How wonderful it was for over 200,000 visitors to have the experience of not only seeing Dippy, but in some cases perhaps entering our stunning cathedral for the first time. I know that Jane will quite rightly praise the whole team for the success of these events, but I also realise that the ethos of making this such a welcoming building for all comes from the top. I must admit that during lockdown, walking by the river was one of my favourite ways of coping with the pressures that we were all experiencing. Sometimes I would bump into Jane, and we would have a quite quick, socially distanced catch-up. It had to be quick, as Benson, the family dog, was always on a mission to be as mischievous as possible. I know that you and your husband are retiring to just outside Alnwick in Northumberland, an area which I know. You will have access to wonderful countryside, stunning beaches and historical castles. But we would like to think that you will miss Norwich and Norfolk with our picturesque coastline, open skies and breathtaking sunsets. I know that the support of your family will have been absolutely key in all that you have achieved, so we wish you well in the next stage of your life. I'm absolutely delighted that you are here with us today to receive the honorary freedom of the City of Norwich. It is so well deserved.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. And now call upon group spokespersons. Councillor Schmier for the Greens, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and I'd like to start by associating myself with the very warm words that we have just heard from Councillor Walters and Councillor Harris. And I too am delighted to support the proposal that the Very Reverend Dr. Jane Hedges be awarded the honorary freedom of the city. As we have heard, awarding the freedom of the city dates back to the 13th century. It is an honorary title that gives the City Council the opportunity to recognise the contribution that individuals make to the city or the distinguished service that groups of people can make. And in this regard, it is absolutely right and proper that Jane be bestowed with this honour. Jane has served the city with distinction. She has a personability, an affability, an integrity and a humility that is, of course, incredibly befitting of her role. And I had the pleasure of meeting her several times during my tenure as Lord Mayor, especially in the Advent period at one of a myriad of carol services where I got to know the lines to Away in the Manger and all the other hours off by heart. But it showed the kind of compassion there and the variety of charities and good causes that she had supported in her time. And her dedication and commitment to the community, both in the city and across the county, were abundantly evident. Her time as Dean of Norwich Cathedral has been one highlighted with innovative ways in which one of the jewels of Norwich, namely the great edifice of the cathedral, has been opened to allow engagement with new audiences. For example, as we have already heard from Councillor Harris, the Helter Skelter in 2019, and more recently the Dippy the Dinosaur display last year. The 200,000 or so people who came to see the dinosaur cast there, or the thousands of people who went on the Helter Skelter, ensured that the cathedral had been opened up and experienced by people who may not have seen the fabulous bosses on the ceiling, or indeed the roof generally of the cathedral, and allowed the nave to be experienced, as I said, by visitors who might not have otherwise been able to do so. And it is a testimony to her hard work that that's happened. One of the aspects of having an established church is that the Church of England is in effect the church for England, and it therefore has a role to play as the conscience of the nation. In this regard, Jane has been a wonderful ambassador, not just for the cathedral itself, but for the people of this fine city since she was first installed in 2014. Hers will be very big boots to fill. We wish her all the best for her retirement. Norwich and Norfolk will miss you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Lubbing, would you like to respond on behalf of the delegates?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In May 2014, just after I became Lord Mayor, one of my first engagements was to welcome to Norwich Cathedral the Very Reverend Dr. Jane Hedges. The ceremony of induction was a magnificent occasion with priests, canons, deans and bishops, all in their finery, from Norwich and from Westminster Abbey, from whence she came, all supporting, encouraging and wishing Jane well in her future role. It was a privilege to officially represent the city and give a welcome to Jane. She was the first female in the cathedral's 900-year history to be appointed to the role of Dean, and as such has been a shining light for equality both within the church and within Norwich and nationally. During the year that followed her induction and my year as Lord Mayor, our paths crossed quite a lot as she embedded herself in the civic, commercial, charitable and educational life of the city. Attending many events and with great enthusiasm, she got to know the city and its people. They also got to know her and recognised in her someone special, someone to look up to, admire for her professionalism, but at the same time, someone with that common touch who could relate to them, their hopes and aspirations, but also their worries and cares. I think it is that quality of the common touch that endeared her to the people and why they have taken her to their hearts. On one occasion during my year, she opened her home for the fundraising supper in aid of the Lord Mayor's charity, Crew's Bereavement Care. And with husband Chris in charge of the cooking, she did a superb job of organising the evening and making everyone feel welcomed. I saw then Jane's professionalism at work, as well as her fun side. And it's with that fun side in mind that I say Jane has embraced new ideas to bring people into our wonderful cathedral church. Inspirational ideas, both serious and joyful. The idea of a helter-skelter positioned in the nave of the cathedral, giving fun and laughter to children and adults alike, allowing them to get up close to the beautiful medieval bosses and see the magnificence of the cathedral from a different, higher perspective. And then followed by Dippy the dinosaur on its tour of Britain, again in the heart of the cathedral and again attracting large numbers. These events were hugely successful for the cathedral and for Norwich. There is a certain symmetry. I was there at the start of Jane's time as Dean, and I'm here on her retirement, giving this endorsement for the Very Reverend Dr. Jane Hedges to be given the freedom of the city in recognition of her great commitment to and affection for Norwich.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vick. Now, in council meetings, I'm required to ask if any of the councillors would like to speak. Okay. So, Councillor Waters, would you like to respond?
Well, I'd like to thank colleagues for all their contributions. I think we have a well-rounded view of you, Jane, many different aspects, and I think it would consolidate our view as a council that we should award the dignity of this honour of freedom of the city.
Thank you very much. We will now move to the vote. All those who are in favour, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. So I would now like to invite the Very Reverend Dr. Jane Hedges to acknowledge this freedom of the city granted to her. Would you like to speak?
Lord Mayor Sheriff, Councillor Waters and Councillor Harris and all the councillors in the chamber, thank you so much. I can't quite believe what's being said about me. Quite often I hear people saying, do you ever feel a bit of a fraud? And this is one of those moments where you think, well, you don't really know me. But I would just like to say, you've all been so kind in what you've said. And I want to say that actually Norwich has been such a special place to be. I've been so privileged and fortunate over my now 42 years of ministry in the Church of England to work in some wonderful places and with fantastic colleagues. But Norwich, I think, has really topped the knot. When Chris and I arrived here, I think we felt welcome here straight away. It didn't take long at all to settle in because everybody was so welcoming. And I was saying to a few people just before we came into the chamber, whenever I've spoken about Norwich, I've said, actually, Norwich has got everything. It's got so many features about it that offer something to everybody. It's universities, it's open spaces, it's shops, and above all the wonderful people that do so much for other people. And I think that the reason that it's been such a wonderful experience at the cathedral is because it's always been actually quite easy to get people to come and be involved in things. One of the things that was in my job description was to try to make a link with the science community. And the Dean of Westminster, who was my boss back then when I was a canon in Westminster, said, Jane, I think you're going to find that really difficult. I don't know about that job really. And so I suppose it was because he'd said that I thought, right, I'm going to make sure that I make a bit of a success of that. And actually, one of the wonderful things has been that scientists straight away have been really wanting to come to the cathedral to do stuff. So we were able to have a science festival very early in my time, and it's that actually led to us then being able to put in our bid to have Dippy. And of course, Dippy then arrived, having been so frustrated because he couldn't come in 2020 when we'd been waiting for 4 years since we'd been told he was coming. The fact that it was then put off a year Well, I think it was a very happy chance in the end, because it came just at the right time for all of us to be a bit more released in the summer and for fantastic things to come out of it. So I just want to say on behalf of Chris and myself and our family, although my boys have been mainly in London while we've been here, they've always loved coming to Norwich, and I think somehow will always regard Norwich as sort of home as well. We are now moving up to the northeast, and people say, why are you going so far away? But actually, the northeast of England has quite a lot in common with Norfolk. And so there will be things up there that remind us of here. But we shall really look forward to rustling some of the sheep that are going to be living over the road from where our new house is and bringing them down to Norwich. It'll be great. But just thank you so much. It's an enormous honour and such a surprise. But thank you so much to everybody and for making our time here so happy. And I hope that the next dean that comes will be as happy as I've been. So thank you.
Jane, would you like to come forward? Thank you. We'll now move to item 4 on the agenda of this special meeting, and that is to confer the honour of freedom of the city to our sisters and brothers in our fellow UNESCO cities of literature, to the Ukrainian people of Lviv and Odessa. And once again, I call upon Councillor Waters to move item 4.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. A more sombre frame for this award of the freedom of the city to our 2 sister UNESCO cities, as you referred to. I've just been thinking about the honorary freedom of the city and who it's been granted to over the years, and it has been, of course, awarded for distinguished contributions in many fields to individuals and organisations. But I think this is the first time we have bestowed this award on 2 sister cities in Ukraine for valiantly upholding the rights of democracy and democratic freedom against an authoritarian dictatorship that has embarked on a brutal, illegal invasion and recalls the advance of dictatorships in the 1930s. And they are our sister cities, Lviv and Odessa, because of their UNESCO status as cities of literature. And I visited Lviv for a week in 2019, had an opportunity to meet the mayor of that city, and we made a connection immediately by virtue of the fact that in giving me a history of the Ukraine, and I was wondering quite what I was to give him in return, because this meeting had been set up fairly spontaneously, and he happened, by serendipity, to mention that Lviv is known as the Lion City. So the opportunity to take off my lapel, a symbol of the lions that guard our own city hall, and present it to him as a reciprocal gift was a very, very nice moment. And I met representatives from Odessa because they had come to our meeting of the UNESCO Cities of Literature. Other cities were represented there, including Krakow, and they were seeking that status, and they successfully got that status. And it was a delightful time, you know, a sense of optimism, a sense of the creativity that makes great cities. And there was a return visit by the deputy mayor of Lviv, and he and his wife came here on a Saturday morning, and we were able to go to the top of the clock tower, and we were able to have lunch together. And before he left, he gave me this cup, which is with the symbol of Lviv on the side. And you won't be able to see the detail, but the symbol of that city, and it's a wonderful city, a beautiful city, undamaged by war, is of the different faith groups and the buildings they occupy in Lviv. And that is a testament to the tolerance, the respect for human rights, and the celebration of diversity and all the strengths that this brings. And I'm delighted this evening to welcome Chris Gribble, Chief Executive of the National Centre for Writing, who will be contributing later in this honorary freedom event. When I was in Lviv, I met a formidable representative of the cultural life of the city, and with whom Chris has particularly close working relationship, and I know has been in touch with her on a regular basis. Her name is Bogdana. And she wrote to us yesterday, delighted by the news that this recognition, it really does help in terms of a sense of solidarity, and a sense of being united with other democracies and other democratic cities. And I just picked out a short extract from her email to us. And I know that Chris will be referencing some other passages in what she had to say. But for me, the nub of it was, we are being punished for being different. Russia has somehow decided that Ukrainians needed to be liberated. From what? From democracy and supporting the communist humanist values? And these values are our values. Democracy is under threat. Our sister cities are in the front line of defending democratic values, and that's what's animated that tremendous resistance against what looks like overwhelming odds. If we believe that people of principle can come together and to fight for the values they believe in, we are seeing that as an example on a daily basis since this illegal conflict started. And I know my other colleagues, and I've been in conversation with Councillor Lucy Galvin and Councillor James Wright, we share the same views on this issue. And I know they're going to talk about what we need to do as a country to support the Ukrainian refugees that are having to leave the country that they love, because their generosity of spirit in defending the democracy that we value requires a generous response from the United Kingdom government. I hope to goodness that this dismantles the hostile environment which has been a baleful experience for many people fleeing persecution. Afghans, Syrians, people who are leaving their countries because of fear for their lives, totalitarian and arbitrary rule. And this democratic city will join the voices of other local authorities about making sure that there is proper support, proper funding, a recognition of the needs of this group of people who have come to our shores. And I very much hope it is in the spirit in which our European Union neighbours have acted in a spontaneous and generous and non-bureaucratic fashion. So I am delighted and frankly moved by the experience and the opportunity to make the case for the honorary freedom of the city, for the Ukrainian people that live in Odessa, and in representing those two cities, we are, of course, throwing our arms around the whole of the Ukraine population and solidarity with them all. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Waters. I now call upon Councillor Harris to second this item.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I feel proud to be here today to second the proposal so very eloquently put forward by Councillor Waters. I know that the proposal will be supported by all parties in this chamber, and we stand as one in our admiration for all of the people of Ukraine. We have all watched with horror and disbelief as the Ukraine has been invaded and attacked by the Russian forces. And today we're here to give our support to the residents of the two Ukrainian cities, Lviv and Odessa, cities with which we have a close association. We are here to recognise their battle to uphold the rights of democracy and democratic freedom. There are millions of people who, for their own safety, are having to flee their homeland. There is a high proportion of both women and children having no alternative but to seek safety in neighbouring countries and to leave their menfolk to continue with the fight. Some women are getting their children to safety and then returning to stand shoulder to shoulder with their men in battle. Can you imagine the strength of character that takes? Norwich has for centuries been a compassionate city, and I know that with this humanitarian crisis, the people of Norwich will once again open their arms and be ready to welcome those fleeing the conflict zones. As a city and a housing authority, we have always played a pivotal role in any resettlement programme. This will be no different. However, it is vital that every authority of the country plays its part, and we need clear guidelines from the government on how this will be achieved. I could talk about what we have achieved in the past, but somehow that seems irrelevant. The important point is that we will not shirk our responsibilities as a district council and will play our part in helping to source accommodation for those Ukrainian families needing to be rehoused to have a home. We have done it before and we will do it again. We also know that this will not simply be about accommodation, but the support that will be needed to enable integration into the community. The government is also encouraging private citizens to step forward with offers of either individual properties or shared accommodation. The public most certainly seems supportive of this. There are of course safeguarding issues with shared accommodation, which will have to be worked through, and I expect that as a council we will need both to source accommodation and to help with assessing the suitability of individual properties offered by the private rental sector. At the moment, we need clear instructions from government, and we are ready to respond. I know that many other people in the chamber will be anxious to contribute tonight, and indeed, I was warned in a very sensitive email during the day saying, keep it short, Gail. So thank you for being here, and I hope that we can all get behind this freedom of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. I would like to invite the group spokespersons to speak, starting with Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you to the other speakers, Councillor Waters, Councillor Harris. Green councillors are very pleased, delighted to support this act of heartfelt solidarity by our fine city to the fine cities of Lviv and Odessa. Norwich City Council stands in solidarity, as we're here tonight, with all the people of Ukraine as they defend peace and democracy. We will continue to support community groups and third sector organisations that are helping to organise relief, as well as the Ukrainian community in Norwich. And those that arrive, we stand ready to help. We call upon the government to ensure adequate support is ready. It needs to be long-term, properly funded, and sensitive to the needs of those displaced. It needs, as Councillor Waters said, to be the end of a hostile environment forever. We call on the UK government to urgently follow the lead taken by European leaders in response to Ukrainians seeking sanctuary from war by establishing safe routes for people to come to the UK for asylum, and by aligning our processes with the EU-wide plan for resettling refugees with visa-free access. It must also immediately strengthen its sanctions on Russia and on Russians with links to the Kremlin, including freezing or seizing assets and banning access to UK financial and property markets. It must also properly fund local councils' refugee support programmes, including affordable housing for refugees and foster placements for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Safeguarding is key. Links between people, literature, culture, friendship are the most enduring and strongest weapons. I'd like to share a message to us from my friend, colleague and child of Lviv, Solomir Roshko. I met Solomir back in 2010 while in Lviv, supporting Ukrainian protected areas in the Carpathian Mountains. We worked closely together to ensure sustainable development of the parks and reserves, as well as the economic sustainability of local communities and proper promotion of tourism and recreation. Cooperation between our organisations as well as our countries proved to be long-term and fruitful. We built reliable personal and professional connections. Many interesting and happy times were spent in amazing landscapes, such as the wild, pristine, primeval forests of the Korhani Nature Reserve, travelling across peaceful rolling farmland, working with the dedicated, passionate scientists, park rangers and communities. I took examples from my work in Norfolk, in the Broads and on the coast and further afield, and they shared their challenges and opportunities. Today, Solomir's words sum up the reality of the danger, displacement and uncertainty the Ukrainian people are facing, and I'd like to use them. She says, for the last 5 years I've worked in Kharkiv, a beautiful city in eastern Ukraine, which is now carpet bombed daily. At the beginning of February, I relocated to Kiev and then spent a couple of weeks there, and on the 23rd, one day before the war started, I came to Lviv because I was allowed to telework from there for 4 days. On the 24th, I evacuated my field office to Krakow in Poland, and a week later relocated to my former colleague's flat in Berlin. I will be moving even closer to you this Saturday because I will be visiting my colleague who lives about 40 kilometres from Dublin. Don't quite know what I will do next. Ukraine has certainly faced turbulent times in the past, but today our country is fighting its toughest battle yet. Every day the people of Ukraine are defending our cities, villages, schools, hospitals, homes. We are defending our freedom. I was very lucky to be born and raised in Lviv, a city in western Ukraine. It is my place of strength, my favourite destination, my home, and also one of UNESCO's cities of literature. I am very proud to have many good friends and colleagues in the UK. I know the people of the UK have been reaching out to the citizens of Ukraine in many different ways. My heart is filled with gratitude for every donation, for each warm welcome in your homes, for raising awareness on social media, for collecting aid and speaking to politicians on our behalf. What you are doing for Ukraine is truly priceless. Thank you, Solomir. So I'm proud that as a city, as we reach out to the citizens of Lviv and Odessa with this honour, we reach out to all the citizens of Ukraine. Norwich, always a city of refuge, stands with them in their hour of need. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you very much, Councillor Galvin. And I call upon Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm sure, just like me, members in the chamber here today will have watched in horror as Putin unleashed his missiles on innocent Ukrainians. Speaking with friends and colleagues, there seems to have been a collective feeling of helplessness and wanting to do something as millions of families are forced to flee for their lives, leaving everything behind.
The response of the British people and our friends across Europe has been inspiring, sending food, clothes and medicines to families in need. 10 days ago, I was in Poland and witnessed firsthand the generosity with which the Polish people and their government have welcomed their neighbours. Just as we welcomed refugees from other conflicts in the past, people across the UK have said loud and clear, we want to welcome them with open arms. But our government has been slower to react, out of step with public opinion, out of step with the rest of Europe by insisting on a bureaucratic visa system. Priti Patel's response to this humanitarian catastrophe, the biggest in Europe since World War II, is utterly shameful. To quote Linda Davey, she has answered desperation with delays, crisis with confusion, pain with paperwork. Even a member of her own party, Sir Roger Gale, told the Commons that in any normal administration, her behaviour would have been a resignation matter. We in Norwich stand willing to help our friends in Ukraine, and other nearby councils should also play their part, and the government must not dither and ensure that we are all properly funded so that those people who arrive with nothing can be given all of the support that they need. It isn't simply a case of just putting a roof over someone's head. Even when we are considering accommodation, safeguarding must be properly considered as a matter of urgency. It is telling that in his letter yesterday to local authority leaders, Michael Gove talks more about security checks on those fleeing for their lives than about making sure safeguarding checks are carried out on hosts. Using Norwich as an example, there could well be a role for language schools to help here given the potential volume. They are already used to checking homes of hosts and well versed in dealing with those for whom English is not their first language. It's also worth reflecting that amidst tragic scenes in Ukraine, there have been moments that show the humanity of the situation. Firstly, Hassan, who arrived safely in Slovakia after travelling some 750 miles from eastern Ukraine with no more than 2 small bags, a passport and his relative's phone number written on his hand. Remarkable considering he's only 11. Makes me think about my own 11-year-old nephew, how my own 11-year-old nephew would have coped up with this. Then there was Amelia, whose rendition of Let It Go from Frozen while sheltering in the basement captivated social media and reminded us of the impact that war has on children in particular. And finally, there was the military couple who married on the front line at a checkpoint near Kyiv, presumably not knowing if they would see each other again, or if they would ever will, for the wedding they had planned. Given everything they had been through in such a short period of time, we have no hesitation in supporting conferring freedom of the city on the people of Lviv and Odessa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wright. Other councillors who wish to speak? I now call upon Councillor Waters who would like to respond.
Could I, Lord Mayor, just check that you're going to invite Chris Gribble to speak after we've concluded the necessary business?
Yes, I was going to do that after the
Okay,
vote.
that's fine. Thank you. Well, thank you to colleagues for their eloquence and for laying out the issues that need to be practically addressed by government. And one thing that we've agreed to do is to collectively write to the relevant government departments. We will put this letter into the public domain with advice, both in terms of the principles that government should think about following, but also the sustainability for individuals, for organisations that will be working with Ukrainian refugees which will come back to this country. Because Ukraine is in the spotlight and we follow the war each day to see how things are developing, wishing for the best, but ready for some fresh infringement of the laws of war. But we're also thinking about the reputation of our country and its behaviour and its response. And this is a crucial moment for this country and how it is viewed by other nations, not just in Europe, but globally. And I hope this government will step up and do the decent thing. We talk about democracy, but democracy is about recognising the needs and rights of others when they need help. And that is something which needs to focus minds, and we will be happy as a council to provide some advice about the journey to be taken to make sure that we provide our guests with all the support that they need, and while they're with us, to make sure that they feel part of our community and that they will be able to flourish and make the contribution that Bogdana talked about in her email to us yesterday. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. I now move to a vote. All those in favour of this motion, please indicate. The voting is unanimous. Now, the British Association of Ukrainians have apologised. They are unable to send a representative due to their ongoing work in supporting the Ukrainian community. I would like, therefore, to invite Chris Gribble, who is Chief Executive of the National Writers' Centre, to acknowledge the freedom on behalf of the cities of Lviv and Odessa.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you to the City Council for inviting me to speak today. It's a short message from our colleague Bogdana, as Councillor Waters already mentioned. It was written in the early hours of Sunday morning, just after the first bombs had started to fall on Lviv itself. It has been 18 days of active war, which seems like eternity. So many words and manifestations have been told and created, but none of them is yet expressing the full spectrum of what we are feeling, and nor do these words also. Lviv, a city of literature like Norwich, some of you may have been here, there are many of us who live here. It is a city of inspiration, a city that carries Ukrainian traditions, hospitable and calm. Today, for the first time since the war started, we have been under shelling. The bombs fell on the International Peacekeeping Centre, located not far from Lviv and even closer to the Polish border, to the European Union. The distance is actually as much as we were walking every day when we visited Norwich. As a result of this bombing, 35 people were killed, more than 100 injured, people from a city of literature, on the European border. They died from a Russian occupant. We have to stop it together in any possible way, with sanctions, protests, and of course, by closing the sky over Ukraine. We have to stop this nightmare. We ask you to spread the word as much as possible to try to affect cultural and political circles in your cities. We ask you to be with and to know Slava Ukraina, long live Ukraine, we will win, we are unbreakable. We thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you for attendance. We will shortly be returning for the ordinary council meeting at, well, it should be at 7:30, but shall we say 10 minutes? Does anybody anticipate any need for it to be longer? Okay, it's been suggested 15 to compromise, we're halfway. Everyone happy with that? We'll start at 20 past then, yep.